So in three, two, one.
Yeah, but before we get started, I just want to ask, guys, does this week feel like it has been 5 days crammed into three or what? First week back. Oh my God.
I'm gonna go to Patrick on that because Patrick just got back in country, what, on Tuesday, and you've been running hell for leather since you hit the ground, right, Patrick?
I got back from Europe on Tuesday night. That's right, where everyone was talking about Venezuela and the same things everyone's talking about here. So,
Oh,
uh,
did something happen in Venezuela?
Stop. We're gonna talk about that in the show. We're gonna talk about it in
All
the
right.
show.
Let's kick things off.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, your roundup of labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and beyond.
That's right. Every week we dip into the Labor Radio Podcast Network to bring you organizers, workers, journalists, and troublemakers talking about what's really going on.
and this week we've got a lot going on: geopolitics, strikes, tax schemes, a brand new show, year-end reflections, and even a fresh theme song.
Ooh, stay tuned for that fresh theme song. We are starting big this week with the dig. Get it? Starting big with the dig.
Oh,
Ale-
very nice.
Alejandro Velasco, Gabriel Hetland, and Yoletty Bracho take on the U.S. attack on Venezuela and what Trump's imperial project looks like up close.
Then we come back home with LaborForce, where Mike checks in on strike action at the Telluride Ski Resort because even the ski industry can't escape labor conflict.
Sean over on Tribunus Plebis is also doing what he does best, unpacking Trump's promise not to tax overtime pay and why it's less generosity and more, let's call it, a delayed bribe.
He'll
Yes.
take any bribe, whether it's delayed or in the moment. Come on.
We're also really excited, seriously, folks, to introduce a brand new show on the network, The Union Bug, great name. Mel Buer, the host, talks worker-focused media with, oh my goodness, Harold and moi.
I thought that sounded familiar. It's always a good sign when labor media talks about labor media.
Plus, Rusty's getting some end-of-the-year financial advice on the wealthy iron worker. The Labour Notes podcast staff shared their New Year's resolutions, and the Bipartisan Buzz debuts a new hard-rockin' intro.
And it does rock hard.
And stick around for our shows you should know segment. We've got tariff debates, year-end wrap-ups, best of episodes, and a look ahead to 2026.
All right, let's jump on in.
Here's the dig.
So we begin with an extended cut from The Dig, which goes deep into labor, political economy, imperialism, and global power.
Yeah, rock hard. In this episode, sorry.
Oh, it's good. I
In
like
this
it.
episode, Alejandro Velasco, Gabriel Hetland, and Yoletty Bracho break down the US attack on Venezuela, looking at Trump's imperial ambitions, oil politics, and how different political forces inside Venezuela respond.
Welcome to The Dig, a podcast from Jacobin Magazine. My name is Daniel Denvir, and I'm broadcasting from Providence, Rhode Island. Today, I'm discussing the U.S. military assault on Venezuela and the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro with three people: Alejandro Velasco, Gabriel Hetland, and Yoletty Bracho. Alejandro Velasco teaches Latin American history at New York University and is former executive editor of NACLA, Report on the Americas. He's the author of Barrio Rising, Urban Popular Politics and the Making of Modern Venezuela. Gabriel Hetland is a professor of Latin American Studies at SUNY Albany. He's the author of Democracy on the Ground, Local Politics in Latin America's Left Turn. Yoletty Bracho is professor in political science at the Université d'Avignon in France and sits on the editorial board of Contretemps. Pardon my French pronunciation, as always. Alejandro Velasco, Gabriel Hetland, and Yoletty Bracho, welcome to The Dig.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks.
The U.S. has, for a long time, under multiple presidents, been putting intense pressure on Maduro's government in Venezuela and before that on Chavez's. Why, over the past year, did Trump and his circle so quickly escalate so intensely all the way to this full-on invasion and kidnapping? It seems like it's a sort of over-determined set of MAGA agendas, combining Stephen Miller's desire to create a pretext for mass deportation of Venezuelans, plus Stephen Miller's desire for spectacular military action against cartel targets in Latin America, that alongside Rubio's anti-communism, all of that wrapped up with Trump's overwhelming desire to control Venezuela's oil. How do you all see it? Alejandro.
It is, in fact, that kind of convergence of agendas that seem to have aligned at this moment. I think the other factor to consider in terms of an alignment of interests is the way in which the expatriate opposition led by Maria Corina Machado for years and years has been really laying the groundwork for the various narratives that we have seen used by the Trump administration over the last few months to paint not just Maduro, but Venezuela in general as this threat to Venezuela. They've been talking about, narco-terrorism, links to Hezbollah and to Hamas. They've been talking about releasing prisoners from jails and flooding the United States with criminals. Of course, they've been talking about these fentanyl production and so all of these narratives that have very little relationship to facts on the ground. Those who've been following Venezuela for a while have been hearing from the opposition. So in a way, what they have helped to do is to lay the groundwork for the kind of discourse that we've now seen turned into practice. And the other factor, of course, is the weakness of the Venezuelan government in general, and the significant lack of popular support and the erosion of Chavismo, especially grassroots Chavismo, under Maduro's government. Right, I think that has made it vulnerable, and especially vulnerable to having to seek some kind of a negotiated exit, which was a scenario that we had long anticipated. But what was surprising is that for at least up to now, the echelons of Chavismo had remained pretty cohesive under Maduro. And so part of the question, I think, is going to be, at what point did who remains in Venezuela in power feel like it was more advantageous to give up Maduro and to try to work out some kind of deal with the Trump administration than to remain defiant in the face of increasing pressure.
Yoletty?
Yeah, I also think that there is a variable that is important internationally is the far right becoming far more and more powerful. And this idea that for Donald Trump, doing this kind of action today has at least little, I wouldn't say no answer, but this little answer from the international communities in general. And in Latin America, you see lots of countries today supporting also this kind of action because of the alignment of these new presidents with the Trumpian ideology, to say something like that. So yeah, I think there is also an international configuration that allows for this to happen and having less consequences than maybe in another time.
Gabriel.
Yeah, I'll add a few factors. I agree with everything you guys are saying. And I think on one hand, this is sort of an unfinished goal of Trump's first term. They wanted to remove Maduro in that term. They didn't end up doing it, probably because they felt like the risks were too great and the benefits were unclear. So I think that's, a minor factor. But then I think a confluence of different things happening in Trump's second term now. Anti-immigration is one of the big ones as well. And that connects to Venezuela in this sort of mythological way, the idea that Venezuelans are gang members and drug dealers. One of the things that makes me so angry also is because so many Venezuelans are in the US because of Trump's actions in his first term. And then Trump uses that for his own domestic sort of political agenda. So that just is always infuriating, just the the clearest expression of Trump's hypocrisy on that one point. But then, back to your question and away from my rant for a second, I think that, obviously Marco Rubio is the other expression, and Alejandro has talked about this in many different venues, of this sort of desire to destroy the Latin American left in all of its different formulations. And I think all of us are really critical of Maduro and don't see him as a particularly genuine expression, but he's still, seen within the world as some expression of the Latin American left, of course. And, there's a lineage of Chavez. And so getting rid of Maduro within Venezuela, implementing this sort of regime change agenda certainly fits into that larger goal. And Yoletty was talking about it, that there's this whole remaking of Latin America that Trump has been engaged in. He has done it really explicitly in Argentina, in Honduras, in Brazil. He sort of, hasn't done a regime change operation, but he's been very actively involved in helping Bolsonaro and trying to undermine Lula. I think it's interesting to note that that doesn't always work. That actually helped Lula in certain ways. So, Trump's machinations don't always have the effect that he wants them to have. But I think those are some of the critical factors. And then the other thing that I think has to be mentioned is the Epstein, files. And that is, the domestic sort of desire to distract from your problems. That is clearly something that is at play in things going on with Venezuela. And, every time that there's sort of pressure around the Epstein files, people talk about Venezuela, and certainly the timing of the two does coincide with the boat bombings and the escalation of pressure to release files and Trump's worry about that. So I think there's other factors, but those are some of the, really main ones.
Trump announced that the United States is now governing Venezuela and is, quote, not afraid of boots on the ground. But then astoundingly, it turned out that they're planning on Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez being the one to carry out the U.S. agenda, essentially governing on the U.S.'s behalf, even as Rodriguez, at least initially, adamantly condemned Maduro's kidnapping and insisted on the legitimacy of his presidency. Quite notably, Trump's rejected the idea that Maria Corina Machado could lead Venezuela, and he's expressed no support for Edmundo Gonzalez, the opposition candidate who lost an election that many observers said was stolen, and the person who Machado says should be put into power immediately. Who is running Venezuela right now? Who might be running it in the months and years ahead? And was there likely collusion between Rodriguez and the Trump administration in carrying this whole thing out?
I mean, who knows what's going to happen in a few months or certainly even years. But what does seem, at least to me, to be the case is that if, in fact, we're looking at a regime change operation, it's a very sui generis regime change. It's actually in some ways unprecedented, certainly for Latin America, insofar as, yes, there's the decapitation of the government by abduction of Maduro, but the rest of the state remains intact. All of the institutions of the state remain in place. The ministries remain in place. The major players who remain are still there. Nothing has moved. And in fact, one of the things that happened just today is that the new National Assembly was sworn into office, which interestingly, some opposition politicians were elected last year. And so, and they were there and they issued condemnations of the violation of Venezuelan sovereignty, right? And that suggests this kind of schism between a domestic opposition and an expatriate opposition that Maria Corina Machado is going to have to manage. But in terms of who controls Venezuela, I mean, on the ground, the elements of statecraft remain in the hands of Delcy Rodriguez and the folks in power there. The question that you're pointing to, of course, is under what conditions are they in power? And to what extent is the Trump administration's threats of, doing to Delcy something worse than happened to Maduro, is it a bluff? Are they, in fact, is Trump actually willing to commit troops on the ground to a scenario of, longer term involvement and really rebuilding, or are they willing to play ball with Delcy to the extent that Delcy and her people have already indicated that they do want to seek some kind of collaboration with the Trump administration, and especially having to do with oil rents, right? So that those are big question marks that that we have to work with, which is also to say that neither are all the cards in Trump's hands or the Trump administration's hands, nor, of course, are they in Delcy Rodriguez's hands. Each has some leverage against the other in order to achieve their ends, which is, in one hand, to stay in power, and the other hand, as Gabe was mentioning before, to reassert, or in fact, to assert anew, a vision of not just hegemony, but really domination of the hemisphere on the part of the Trump administration.
For me, this also has consequences about what happens on the ground, because, the authoritarian government is still in place and people feel it. And this is important. Whatever we think and the condemnation that we can say about these actions, about these actions from the states on Venezuela, obviously there are people in Venezuela who might be somehow happy about the fact that Maduro is not there anymore. And one could have thought that in a situation like this, there could have been manifestations of joy, public manifestations of joy. These things could have happened. Well, you have none of that. And one of the things that come from what people say from the ground is that they still also are living under the authoritarian government. They're still also still scared about what the consequences of going out and maybe celebrating this situation could have. There are still people who are keeping discreet to avoid repression, because obviously repression happens in Venezuela. And then again, I'm not saying this because I would think that the actions of the United States would be there to actually benefit the Venezuelan people, or either or the democracy, or the idea of a democratic future for Venezuela. I'm just saying that clearly this also shows that the Trump administration can seem to be able to also get in contact and arrange itself with the authoritarian government if this serves their interests. And this is also, for me, a big question, is that United States imperialism, it's been able, obviously, in history to have good alliances, and not only in history, today, alliances with governments that submit their populations to extremely harsh situations. This also could happen in this new environment in Venezuela. This could also mean somehow of like an strengthening of the people in power today.
Yeah, Gabriel, Trump has been so brazenly, incredibly explicit about U.S. control over Venezuelan oil being a central rationale for the intervention. Is it possible that what's going on basically is that as long as Rodriguez runs the Venezuelan oil industry to Trump's liking, along perhaps with severing ties with Cuba, that this might be good enough for Trump? Is that mission accomplished for Trump? Is it possible that we'll see Rodriguez in power, sanctions lifted, and the sort of professed goals of free elections and political power for the opposition, all these sort of classic liberal interventionist and neoconservative rationales for U.S. intervention, all of that falling to the very bottom of Trump's to-do list, or really off that list entirely?
Yeah, I think those are, exactly the questions. We don't know exactly, how some of those things will play out. I think that oil is clearly a very important factor. I would say that we'd all agree it's not the only factor. And then Trump's plans to control the Venezuelan oil industry. I mean, Miguel Tinker-Salas was saying with Alejandro earlier today on Democracy Now!, it'll take a decade for, oil in Venezuela to get anywhere close to where it was in the boom years of Chavez. And so that's a really long-term project. So Trump wants control, meaning he wants American oil companies specifically to control Venezuelan oil. But whether or not that is possible in the short term, I think it's not possible entirely to, resurrect the Venezuelan oil industry that quickly. And then, what is going to be happening in the next few years specifically to your question, which I've been racking my brain around, when would they be willing, or would they be willing to lift the sanctions? I mean, that has been one of the most devastating factors for Venezuela's economy. There's a lot of reasons for, the mess that Venezuela is in, economic mismanagement, but the sanctions, I would say, are the number one reason Venezuela has not been able to recover from its economic collapse. And I don't think the Trump administration is going to be inclined to lift them anytime soon because of various factors. I think that Machado and the sort of right-wing opposition, which is very influential abroad, outside of Venezuela, and they're going to be talking to EU leaders, they're going to be talking to far-right leaders in the US Congress, in Florida in particular, and they're going to be really pissed about the idea of just handing the reins of Venezuela from Maduro to Delcy Rodriguez, who was a Madurista, of course, and a long-time, high-level official there. So it feels like the prospects of doing that are really uncertain, but that just means the mess, that Venezuela's in, including economically, is going to continue for quite some time. And then to just quickly go to your earlier question, Dan, I've referred to what's happening now as regime change without a change of regime, because it's so weird what's going on that you have this, removal of the leader, but then all of the structures, as Alejandro and Yoletty were saying, have remained very much intact in many ways. But of course, the Venezuelan state is under constraints, which they always have been for years and years, but it's much more explicit. I mean, the US is now whispering or shouting in their ear, do this, don't do that. And so it's a more sort of explicit degree of US influence and domination over the government within Venezuela. I'm not totally sure that that would be entirely different than what could have happened under Maduro. I mean, Maduro wanted US oil companies to come to Venezuela. He wanted really good relationships with Trump. So in some sense, what we're seeing now might be what could have happened under Maduro. But it's dangerous because it's a much more naked form of US imperialism on steroids. And so that just has all sorts of risks for Venezuela, Latin America, and the world.
Right. I mean, it's a very Trumpian form of regime change in the sense that we know Trump does not have a problem with authoritarianism. I mean, we know that no U.S. president really has, given the track record of U.S. alliances throughout the world. But it's crystal clear that Trump not only doesn't have a problem with authoritarianism, he's a big fan of it and a keen emulator of it. What he does have a problem with is people who don't interpersonally submit to his domination, which I think goes some way in explaining why removing Maduro as the individual for Trump, the Maduro who was dancing and defying him on stage, was the part of the regime, the only part of the regime he cared about changing. Yoletty, please.
And it's also the idea that at a point, the Trump administration made Maduro the scarecrow. He's the man that is scary, the one who's a terrorist, etc. So I think sometimes people would say, well, that Maduro was given enough opportunities to actually concede what the United States were asking. Yeah, but even though at a point he was publicly conceding, it was already impossible because it would have been impossible for Trump to actually assume that, okay, so now I made a deal with Maduro. It was not symbolically not possible anymore. So I think it was also important to say, hey, we take him out, and now the people that are there, yeah, we can actually make deals with them because they're different somehow. They do not symbolize the same thing, the same scarecrow that Maduro became.
Hey, this is Mike Struan from the LaborForce podcast. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Hey, this is Judy Ansell from the Heartland Labor Forum. We're radio that talks back to the boss, and we're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Next up, LaborForce, where Mike takes a close look at organizing and strike activity.
This time, Mike examines the strike action at the Telluride Ski Resort and what it reveals about leverage, seasonal labor, and worker power in resort economies. And also, good news, I just read that the folks at Telluride just ratified a CBA.
Oh, that is great news. I'm so happy for them. Excellent.
Welcome to the LaborForce podcast. Stories of the working class in a time of renewed labor militancy and awareness that capitalism is a rotten deal. I'm your host, Mike Struan, proud member of New York State United Teachers. Telluride Ski Resort has been shut down amid an ongoing strike by the Telluride Professional Ski Patrol Association, whose members voted overwhelmingly to walk out after months of stalled contract negotiations with resort owner Chuck Horning over pay and working conditions, leading to a steep drop in visitors during a typically busy holiday season and prompting other nearby resorts to see increased bookings as Telluride tourism suffers. While the resort continues snowmaking and says it is actively developing and refining our safety plan to support a safe reopening as soon as possible, union leaders say Horning doesn't seem interested in communicating with us whatsoever, and lodging occupancy has fallen significantly compared with last year.
We are on an unfair labor practice strike related to negotiating our new contract with Telluride Ski and Golf.
What are you asking?
We are asking for a sustainable wage structure that supports attraction and retention, as opposed to a one-time pay increase that's going to land us in the same position again in 3 years.
I feel like it's pretty reasonable.
I think so. I think the actual monetary difference between what we're asking for and what the company's offering is quite small. They just seem unwilling to engage in a conversation about our wage structure, which we feel is outdated and doesn't give people a clear path in this career.
And how does it seem the community is responding to this?
I think there's varying opinions. I think there's a lot of people who are really supportive of us. I think there's a lot of people who are really scared about the potential of how this impacts the community. The unfortunate reality is that doing this does affect the community, but there's a certain point where we need to advocate for our group, and it's just more that we have the power to do so and other people don't because we're unionized.
Yeah. What about the idea that, Telski's statement was something to the effect of, like, the ski patrollers are choosing to shut down the mountain? What's the...
friendships.
What's kind of the response to
that? It's not within our power to do that. They've known for months that this was a potential direction this was going in, that this wasn't an empty threat, and that we were being really honest about our needs as an organization, and for them to say that it was our choice to do this is really unfair and hurtful to place the blame on our shoulders when we're just trying to live here.
That just shows you, nowadays, it doesn't matter the sector. It's fundamentally all the same. In this case, there's no resort without these workers, and they damn well know it. Kudos to them for holding the line and strategically doing so during the busy time of the year. Hit this greedy owner where it directly hurts. Well, that does it for this episode. If you like what you hear, give a rate or review on your favorite podcast app to help me grow. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, with over 200 labor shows you can check out at laborradionetwork.org. This has been the LaborForce Podcast. I'm Mike Struan. Solidarity, always.
Hey, this is Michaela from the UFCW 3000 podcast. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
On the Labor Notes podcast, the staff is doing something a little bit lighter.
They share their New Year's resolutions, offering a mix of humor, reflection, and organizing priorities for the year ahead.
You're listening to the Labor Notes Podcast, our weekly show on rank-and-file news and organizing tactics. I'm Natasha Laney-Ullman, a staff writer at Labor Notes.
And I'm Danielle Smith, an organizer at Labor Notes. It's a new year, but the same old us. Plus, a number of voices you've probably heard before.
Since it's the new year, we'll be talking resolutions this week.
Well, passing resolutions can be helpful sometimes and even crucial for union reform, but we really should be careful not to get too hung up on...
No, silly. New Year's resolutions.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm going to stop going to AMC theaters at 9:30 a.m.
Organizing resolutions.
Oh, thank goodness, because I'm definitely not going to stop doing that. Well, then, what's yours?
My organizing resolution is to get off Zoom. In a couple projects I'm involved with, we've been trying to have in-person meetings more, whether it's just talking strategy over dinner or having a sign-making party. And it's just so much better than staring at the screen for an hour. There's something about being in a room together that makes people feel so much more connected and militant and ready to take on big fights. Oh, and also to get off Twitter. What's yours?
Oh, I'm also going to get off Zoom. Just kidding. I'm facilitating our Holding Effective Meetings workshop on January 22nd. Well, I think my resolution is kind of a bit of the I'm going to the gym of organizing resolutions, but my plan is to make more phone calls. It can get so easy to get caught up in the other organizing work we do, sending emails, planning workshops, getting trapped inside of a spreadsheet, that we forget to do the thing that really builds our power, talking to our fellow workers and organizers. And honestly, as much as I can dread phone calls sometimes, it's just the millennial in me, I swear, I almost always feel amazing afterwards.
Speaking of calls, we asked our coworkers to send in their organizing resolutions. And we asked nicely without making any threats or using emotional manipulation. Stick around to hear what they had to say, and you might recognize some voices from earlier pod episodes.
Hey, this is Keith. I'm an organizer on the training team, focused on building trades and climate fights. And my organizing resolution for the year is to get better at running a pyramid scheme, by which I mean to delegate better. I have a bad habit of jumping into the void of facilitating or planning all by myself, and plan to do a lot more asking workers that I'm organizing with this year to step up and fill those roles. And it might take some more work up front to support them and follow up, but it's going to pay off in the long run. We're going to have hopefully 10 times more people doing better work than I can alone.
Hi, my name is Al Bradbury, and I'm an editor at Labor Notes, and I report on postal workers and Teamsters. My organizing resolution this year is to stop overcommitting, which means I need to be realistic about how long things will take. I tend to be way too optimistic about how much I can get done in a day. So I'll promise to get 10 things done by Friday, and then on Friday I'm emailing 5 people to say, I'm so sorry, I really thought I could get this done, but a lot of other things came up. Will Monday work? The result is I'm stressed out, and I'm causing a problem for the people who are counting on me. I think it's much better to make realistic commitments and then be reliable about following through, and that's how I want to operate in 2026.
Hi, this is Sarah from the Training and Events team at Labor Notes. For my 2026 organizing resolution, I went back to my copy of Secrets of a Successful Organizer. The one that stuck out to me this year was number 26, Even when you lose, you gain something. We've lost a lot of fights this year, and we're going to lose a lot in the future too, but that doesn't mean we don't fight. Lesson 26 asks, did we get a solid improvement? Maybe not. But did we get smarter about the forces we're facing, and what will it take to win? Did we hone our tactical skills or our understanding of strategy? It also asks how we use the battle to build a stronger organization. Did we build personal connections of trust or alliances that can be used again? Have more leaders stepped forward? I'll add, how can we ask these questions together so we're helping other organizers analyze power and learn to strategize? After a campaign or contract or an election, it's easy to get right back to work without pausing to assess. So my organizing resolution this year is to prioritize those assessments and evaluations of our fights. What did we win or lose? What did we build? Who joined us? What did we learn about power in the fight? It reminds me of the title of one of my favorite organizing books, The Long Haul, by legendary organizer and educator Miles Horton. We're in this for the long haul, and we hope you are too. Happy New Year.
Hi, this is Diana. I do operations at Labor Notes, and my organizing resolution for 2026 is to dress warmly for picket lines. I've never really been someone who dresses well for the weather, but nothing gets to you quite like standing outside in freezing or sub-freezing temperatures for hours at a time. It's not a revolutionary concept, but when I show up to a picket line, I aim to extend my solidarity for as long as I can, because the going will get tough. I can't do that if I'm too cold to stay out. It's hard for me to make a commitment like this for my own benefit, but putting it in terms of an obligation to others makes it crystal clear. True solidarity requires not just good intentions, but the tools and preparedness to stick around when things get hard. So it's time for me to invest in some warm clothes, and I'll see you out there.
I'm Joe, and I'm on the training team at Labor Notes. My organizing resolution for the new year is simple. Make more phone calls.
I'm Barbara, and I'm a staff organizer at Labor Notes. Zoom is great to connect us across geographies, but we need the vibrant humanity of being in the same actual physical space with other people. So my New Year's resolution is to go to and create more in-person worker meetups.
This is Carrie from the training team. My first New Year's resolution is to help put on the best Labor Notes conference yet this June in Chicago. My next resolution is more related to my role as a trainer, and that is to get a new watch battery in one of my watches so that I can use a watch instead of my phone when doing workshops. My cat says hi. And of course, I'm going to resolve to make more organizing phone calls. Right, Danielle?
This is Sindhu. I'm our communications organizer, and as a result, I've been in your inbox a fair bit. I might not resolve to send you fewer emails this year. Why start the year with promises you can't keep? But I do want to hear from you. Whether you're a listener of the pod, you subscribe to the Labor Notes magazine, you're a worker organizing a contract campaign or are otherwise pushing for better at the table and from your union leaders, we want to know what you think of our coverage. We want to hear your organizing questions, and we want to know how your interactions with Labor Notes have influenced your campaigns and your journey in the labor movement. And I resolve to gather more of your stories and hopefully feature them in more ways on our platform.
Labor Notes staff, they're just like us. I genuinely found it encouraging how relatable everyone's resolutions were. I find myself constantly returning to the basics when it comes to organizing.
That's so real, especially the one about getting off Twitter. Oh wait, that was mine.
And we hope you'll resolve to send in your voice notes to us. We want to hear your resolutions, organizing questions, holiday movie organizing takes. Maybe we'll even talk about them in an upcoming episode. You can record a voice note on your phone or computer and email it to podcast@labornotes.org. That's our episode. Please rate us or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. If you're listening to us on Podbean at labornotespodcast.podbean.com, download our episode.
We've got some great online events this new year, including a Running for Union Office workshop on Monday, January 5th that Labor Notes is jointly hosting with the Association for Union Democracy. And our next What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart workshop is on Tuesday, January 6th, featuring federal workers from the Federation of Government Employees, or AFGE, who oppose their union president's call for an unconditional end to the government shutdown. We've also got our next Stewards workshop on the topic of holding effective meetings on Thursday, January 22nd, featuring our very own Danielle. Sign up at labornotes.org/events.
The Labor Notes podcast is produced by Natasha Lena Ullman, Sindhu Sundar, and myself. Our title music was written and performed by our coworker Keith Brower Brown. See you next week. Solidarity, y'all.
Hi, this is Michael Funky from the Radical Songbook on PirateButteRadio.com. I'm proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with over 200 radio shows and podcasts across the country and around the world. Tune in, laborradionetwork.org. Power to the workers and their union.
Well, I'll tell you what, on Tribunus Plebis, Sean turns to Trump's promise not to tax overtime pay.
Sean argues that these kind of proposals use tax refunds as a sort of delayed incentive or reverse bribe while leaving deeper structural inequalities untouched.
Today, as we enter full-fledged tax season, or as I call it, the high unholy days, the time of the year that everybody hates, I want to talk about no tax on overtime. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. It sounds great. It sounds simple. Sounds like something that might actually help working people and not hurt us. Well, the reality is that is not what we got. I guess unsurprisingly for some of us, this might be a surprise for others. The reality is that it's really not much more than a 4-year-long accounting trick that rewards overworking us, the workers. It will shrink job growth, and it also lets politicians pretend that they did something meaningful for labor. All of that without ever threatening employer power along the way. Now, this was a promise that was made on the campaign trail by Donald Trump, and it did eventually get stuffed into that big, beautiful butthole of a bill that got passed early last year. When the promise was first made, no taxes on overtime. I believe that the exact quote was, all taxes on overtime would end. The short version of the bill, as it was passed, is that only the half of time and a half actually counts towards this tax rebate. And by the way, it's not actually no tax on overtime. It's a rebate that you have to file for when you do your taxes.
Hey, it's Chris Garlock from the Labor Radio Podcast Daily. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. More than 200 labor radio and podcast shows across the country and around the world. the Labor Radio Podcast Network, where the people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
Now for something new. The Union Bug is a brand new show. You guys know what a Union Bug is, right? It's that little thing on merchandise that says it's union made. And we're happy to have them on the network.
Host Mel Buer sat down with Harold Phillips. That's you, Harold.
That's me.
And me as well. And we were really just totally honored. She's a great interviewer and so pleased that she chose us to kick off her new show. And she wanted to talk to us about why worker-focused media matters, how labor radio grows, which it does, and what happens when workers tell their own stories. Good things. Spoiler alert.
Welcome, everyone, to the premiere of The Union Bug, a podcast by workers for workers. My name is Mel Buer, and I am your host. As you may have guessed, I am extremely excited to get back behind the mic and share some more incredible worker and labor-focused discussions with listeners like you. To kick off this inaugural season of the podcast, I thought it would be a great time to sit down with two hardworking folks in the labor movement who have built an incredible network of podcasters and audio journalists across the U.S. and beyond. The Labor Radio Podcast Network is a collaborative working group of dozens of labor-focused podcasts and radio shows. With me today to discuss the network, which the Union Bug has accepted a gracious invitation to, and talk about the importance of creating space for worker-focused media are Chris Garlock and Harold Phillips. Welcome to the show, friends. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, Mel, it's such a pleasure to be on and such an honor for us to be your inaugural guest. What a treat.
Yeah, exactly. We are really glad to have the Union Bug as a part of the network, Mel, and we're glad to hear you behind the mic.
I think maybe a good place to kind of move forward is to sort of talk about movement media, if you want to call it that, worker-focused media. You know, why is it important in this day and age to have some sort of iteration of a labor press?
Corporate-controlled media isn't there to talk to working people. Corporate-controlled media is there to make money for corporations. But we have a real democratizing medium here that working people can take advantage of, where anybody in any line of work can record a podcast, upload it, and have it listened to by people around the world. And in getting to the importance of a labor press, people have to have a medium to tell their stories. Having a forum where working people can talk to each other and talk to an audience is really crucial if they're going to be able to understand the circumstances that they're living in right now.
At one point in my career, I was a producer for Jim Hightower, a well-known populist out of Texas. He was doing a nationally syndicated radio show, so I had to listen to, at the time, it was like Rush Limbaugh and Gordon Liddy, all these folks who were in the sort of the talk show space at the time. What I saw was that the right wing was really good at sort of stoking it's a world that we're living in to this day. You know, we're nowhere near countering the right-wing media monolith. Let's be, honest about that. But, it took them a long time to get there. We've got time.
Well, thanks so much, guys. And that's it for us here at the Union Bug this week. Thanks again for your continued support and solidarity as I've gotten this podcast project off the ground. I am so grateful for your listenership, and if you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can head on over to wordsaboutwork.news and subscribe to the newsletter. You will find new episodes of the Union Bug wherever you get your podcasts, dropping every Friday.
Hey, this is Mark, your host on My Labor Radio, and we're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network with more than 200 labor radio shows and podcasts from across the country and around the world. The Labor Radio Podcast Network, where working people speak. Find us at laborradionetwork.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. We often think of labor history as an urban movement happening on the shop floor. Yet farm workers have played an important and often overlooked role in labor history. Such was the case today. The year was 1939. more than 1,500 Missouri farmers and their families began a highway sit-in. The action was organized by the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, one of the few unions in the 1930s that accepted both white and black members. The Southern Tenant Farmers Union had been formed in response to New Deal policies. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Agricultural Adjustment Administration was meant to aid the nation's farmers, who had been economically devastated due to the Great Depression. Yet little of this federal assistance found its way to the tenant farmers. Landowners kept most of the money for themselves. Displaced tenant farm families piled all of their possessions along the side of the highway in protest. These farm workers, their families, and all of their worldly possessions lined two major highways in the Missouri Delta. The tenant farmers braved frigid temperatures day after day. As a tactic, organizers published the actions with photos and newsreels. The newsreels showed startling images of the impoverished farmers and their meager possessions huddled in the freezing cold. Embarrassed by the images, Missouri state authorities moved on the demonstrators and forced them off the highway and into areas the protesters called concentration camps. The actions did catch the attention of President Roosevelt, who directed the Farm Securities Administration to provide assistance, including funding for housing for some of the displaced workers. As John Hancock's Great Depression-era tenant farmer, union advocate, singer-songwriter wrote, "Homeless, homeless we are, just as homeless can be. We don't get nothing for our labor, so homeless, homeless we are." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Before we wrap up, here are a few shows you should know.
On the Manufacturing Report, Scott and Alliance for American Manufacturing Director of Media Relations, Kat Adams, recap 2025 and take on Trump's tariffs, examining market backlash, political fallout, and competing arguments over costs versus strategic benefits.
Speaking of letter carrier podcasts, on From A to Arbitration, the CCA Corner shares an end-of-year wrap-up and looks ahead to 2026. And Corey Walton does the same in a companion episode, in his own imitable style.
The Heartland Labor Forum brings us a best-of episode featuring stories on the labor system that built the Panama Canal, an independent union succeeding in an anti-labor climate, and even a catchy tune about Jimmy Hoffa.
I have to steal that from my show. I love it. Scott looks ahead to a brand new season of the Canadian Union podcast for employees in 2026, his 25th year. Congratulations, Scott. That is truly impressive. Working for the city of Calgary, and they're lucky to have him.
Yeah, Scott is a member of CUPE, and so his podcast is called the Canadian Union Podcast for Employees. Get it? CUPE?
Got it.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly.
All clips used in this program are shared under fair use, and the views expressed are those of the producers and hosts.
This podcast recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement.
You damn right. This show was edited by Patrick Dixon.
Produced by me, Chris Garlock.
And social media, always and forever, by Harold Phillips.
You guys keep saying that. It sounds like you're sentencing me to, you're going to do this always and forever. For the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, he's Chris Garlock.
He's Harold Phillips.
I'm Patrick Dixon.
Stay active. Stay tuned to your local labor radio or podcast show.
And we'll see you next week.